Good evening. Happy Holi and welcome to the monthly Study in the U.S. series organized by the U.S. Consulate General in Mumbai for those interested in studying in the United States. My name is Yoon Nam, and I'm the Cultural Attaché at the U.S. Consulate General in Mumbai. One of our top priorities in the U.S. in promoting the U.S.-India relationship is promoting general and greater education ties between our countries and encouraging Indian students to enroll in one of America's more than 4,000 colleges and universities. To that end, today we have organized a session on safety and security on a U.S. campus. Studying in the United States helps students gain a world-class education, create lifelong relationships, and build strong professional networks that last a lifetime. And because we understand the effort that students and their families make when applying to and deciding on the right school, in today's session, our expert speakers will provide information about security protocols at U.S. universities. The role of Education USA in facilitating your academic journey to the United States does not end with tonight's session. Over the coming months, we have a series of events planned on various aspects of studying abroad, ranging from applying to U.S. universities to student visa orientations and preparing to actually jump on the plane and depart for the United States. Details about our monthly sessions are available on the consulate website and in the chat box here below. Our speaker today is Mr. Manmohan Thorat. Manmohan, an Education USA advisor, completed his Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering with a minor in Sociology at Oklahoma State University. At Oklahoma State, he worked as a systems engineer, a student writer, and website manager of the marketing department of the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology. And moderating the Q&A round will be Dr. Aditi Lele. Aditi holds a doctorate in biology from the University of Arkansas and hails from a village in Western India. She pursued a master's in biodiversity in India, followed by a doctorate in the subject in the United States. As a graduate student, she was a cultural ambassador for the University of Arkansas and was actively involved in the international student community. Education USA is a nonprofit U.S. government-supported network promoting U.S. higher education to students around the world by offering accurate, comprehensive, and current information about opportunities to study at accredited post-secondary institutions in the United States. In addition to information sessions like these, Education USA advises students and their families at their centers and online as well. So I encourage you to reach out to Education USA as you navigate your potential path to studying in America. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed today's session.
Thank you, Yoon. So I'll begin the presentation now. So like Yoon said, we are the official source of information on studying in the US. And our job is to give you accurate, comprehensive, and current information on studying in the US. In India, we have 8 centers. And across the world, we have 430 centers. So that's to give you an idea of the width of the number of students that we work with, and our goals for students to have a successful experience in the US. So before I begin with the presentation, I want to make this very clear to everyone. I know everybody's hearing a lot on the news, and it's difficult to be positive, but I've spoken to many people, including people at the consulate, including people at the US universities, and all international students from India are welcome. They want you there, and you will have a safe and secure experience if you choose to study in the US. So I want to make that very clear. And in this presentation, I hope to make you aware of all the resources that US universities have for students to make use of, to make the most of their educational experience there. and to make sure that nothing unsavory happens to you. In the off chance that it does, we want to make sure that you know what are your options and how to manage any kind of situation that you find yourself in. So I hope that at the end of this session, you feel more confident with your decision to study in the US. And let's begin. So, to begin with, there are many resources for you to utilize on an American campus, and there are a few skills that you can develop to be sure that you'll be okay. Here are some of the main topics I'll be talking about in this presentation. And do bear in mind that you are an international student, but you're also an international traveler. So you're traveling to a completely different country. So there's going to be a slight learning curve. And the earlier that you understand this, the more smoother your experience will become. So I want to make you aware of some of these differences, and hopefully you learn something out of this presentation. So the first thing that I want to make you understand is all international students, regardless of what level of studies you're starting with, whether it's bachelor's, master's, or PhD, have to attend university orientation. So before your classes start, there is something called the week of welcome or welcome week, where all students have to go through, whether it's a week long event or whether it's a few days. The idea of this event is to make make the students aware of the campus, where all the buildings are, where all the resources are, where is the office, where is the police department, where is the gymnasium, what resources can you make avail of as a student. So university orientation is very important in terms that is the first thing that happens on campus, and that will be your first interaction with the university. Here, universities will make you aware of all the resources that are on campus. They'll tell you about how things work. You'll be able to meet other people from all over the world and from America itself. Here's an interesting thing. So you might think that there's a difference between you and American citizens. On a US campus, you have more in common than you think. So this is a way for you to feel involved on campus. You'll be able to meet your peers, and you'll be able to make new friends. So it's a great event that you'll be a part of. So just to give you an idea of how things begin in your academic journey. So you'll be attending the university orientation. My boss Ryan made me put this last point there. It's free stuff. So also at university orientation, all the campus groups set up their booths, and they all have free things, free pens, cups, t-shirts. So it's a great experience to attend this session, and that's how your journey begins. So all international students have to report to the International Student Services Office. This office has only one job, and that is to help international students on campus. All of your needs can be met through this office. All of the documents that you require, any kind of advice that you need, this will be your first stop as an international student. So if there's any issue that you find, if you feel like you can't find the office, a certain office to register for classes, if you feel that you need any kind of help, the International Student Services Office should be your first stop, whether it's your first day of class or whether it's you're about to graduate. This office will always be there to make sure that you have all that you need as an international student. The second thing is the student health services. Most US universities have a health services on campus itself. It's part of your fees, and you can always avail of the services that they have. ranging from basic medical aid to they even have doctors on call. So if you ever have any issue regarding to health, you can always visit the health center on campus. And the second thing that I want to make very clear that you have this resource is counseling services. Health, whether it's physical or mental, is very important. If you feel that you cannot handle, or if you feel overly stressed, you can always use the counseling services. These services are usually free of cost to students, and it makes sure that you can make sure that you have the kind of guidance that you require when it comes to physical and mental health. So these are the really important points that I want to make sure that you understand, that these are always there at the university, and it's part of your student fees. Now, as we move forward, undergraduate students have to live on campus for the first year, usually. And after that, they have the choice whether to live on campus or off campus. Graduate students, masters or PhD, can choose to live off campus, but there is a department on university or at the university called Nightlife. And as you can see in the slide, I've used an example of Lehigh University, their Nightlife. Their job is to make sure that the residence part of the student experience is taken care of, and any kind of support that you need when it comes to residency is met. Now, within the Nightlife, based on where you live, you'll always have someone called the resident advisor. It's the RA, and the resident advisor is your go-to. If you feel like you need some help, the resident advisor would be your immediate person to contact, and there's always going to be one person on call if you live on campus, if it's a campus residence. And then the third point is campus police. I'm going to skip this part for now because I want to talk about campus police a little bit more in detail in some of the upcoming slides. So if you have any issue, if you feel there's any criminal issue, you can always call 911, regardless of where you are, whether you're on campus or whether you're out of campus. It'll take you to the nearest, it'll patch you to the nearest dispatcher, and you can tell them what's going on. And usually, if you're on campus, the response time is quite high. You'll receive help almost immediately. And if you do so, just be ready to state your location, and if you don't know where you are, you can describe what's around you, and that's one thing that you should always know, that you always have this option in terms of safety. In that picture, it's a campus police officer. So usually in large universities have their own police department. They are real police, but they've also received training just for a campus environment. Usually campuses, there are no arms allowed, and security is taken very seriously on campuses. Campuses are some of the most secure places in the United States. So rest assured, on campus you'll be fine. There's always help around. So like I said earlier on, you're not just an international student, you're an international traveler. So I want to make sure that you understand the concept of situational awareness. Regardless of where you are, you should always be aware of your surroundings. There are two types of awareness. One is environmental, which is where you are, and the other is behavioral, based on your own behavior and the people around you. So these are the two things that you should be aware of when it comes to situational awareness. Environmental is, depending on where you are, you can have a sense of security. So campuses are quite safe, but what happens is you might feel very safe on campus and you might carry that sense of security off campus. Just like even in India, wherever you're at, I'll use Mumbai as an example. If you're from Mumbai, we all know that there are certain places that you avoid at certain times. So it's the same thing applies to the US. You should always be smart of where you go. The second thing is, depending on which city you live in, some areas might have a higher crime percentage. Usually these statistics are made online. The data is available online, and almost all universities will have a link to this on their website. And if not, you can always Google search it. Yeah. And the third thing is, avoid night activities. Avoid going out late in the night. Not just in terms of crime. It's also what happens at night is just because somebody's not paying attention, there might be an unfortunate accident. And at night, sometimes maybe it's to do with vehicles, maybe it's to do with just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's not because somebody means you harm, but it's just because it might be just a wrong place, wrong time situation. So you can avoid traveling at night or going out at night. The second thing is behavioral. Now you have all types of people in the US. So as much as you can, especially in the beginning, while you're getting used to a US campus, it might make sense for you to be around a group or have a friend circle. So one of the good things about having student orientation in the beginning is that you're able to make friends earlier on, and you get to do things together. As you explore, as you understand where all the good parts of campus are, as you understand how to make use of all the resources, then you'll get a slight more confidence and to make that better judgment. Until then, it might make sense for you to be around people. Second thing is leaving belongings unattended. I think this is a no-brainer. But if you are at a library, there's a very high chance that if you leave something unattended, somebody will just give it back to the help desk. But you don't want to take that risk. On a US campus, things are quite safe, but still you don't want to take the risk, especially with things like your wallet or your laptop, because it might be a pain to replace it. Another one is walking through deserted alleys and dark areas. It's again similar to walking in at night. And the last one is not paying attention to surroundings and people. This one is particularly a little bit more important. I'll give you an example. So what happens is the US has really good roads. So what happens is if you're driving, you don't have to pay as much attention as you would, let's say, in India, where there's a lot going on the roads. So what happens is someone might just take their eye off the road, and it might be an intersection. You as someone who is walking, it might make sense for you to just look at both sides of the road before crossing. It's just as simple as that. Or if you're driving, do bear in mind that sometimes it's not going to be as engaging as you're used to. So do bear that in mind. Make sure that you're not tired or sleepy. So that's just an example of just paying attention to where you are. The situational awareness is very important. So on-campus housing, universities have given this option to all students. If you're studying at a US campus, is that you can avail of campus housing. There are a lot of resources given to you. Sometimes the housing can be very close to where you're studying, where your lab is, where your classes are. Sometimes they can be a slight walk, maybe a 15-minute, 20-minute walk. Um, so there is this concept in the US where if let's say you are in the laboratory working at night, it's 2 o'clock or after midnight, and you're by yourself, you can always call up the campus. Uh, it's called different things at different universities, but usually it's campus services, and you can ask for someone to escort you to your home. Um, Sometimes they are actual police officers who are on duty. Sometimes they might be the security team from the university. But there is this one service that is provided for students. This makes a lot of sense for people who are conducting research, because sometimes you might end up working quite late in the night. So just know that you have this option. Now, off-campus housing, depending on where you live, a lot of you might choose to live off-campus, and that's also okay. But do bear in mind, what happens is sometimes you might get attracted by a very low rent, and you might not know what you're walking into. So before making the decision of where to live in, it might be a good idea for you to just visit it once. So there can be some very good off-campus housing. Sometimes off-campus housing is provided by the university itself. So just do bear that in mind. That's kind of the best of both worlds, where you get the resources of the university and you get to live off campus. At the graduate level, a lot of students choose to live off campus. They like to live with their friends together. So there's a huge benefit to having people around that you can trust and having that support system. So it can be a good thing, depending on where you're at. Most students will be living in apartments. So there are some very basic things about apartments, which is to keep your doors locked. Apartment buildings usually have a lot of apartments side by side. So there's a lot of density, and there's going to be a lot of people around. A lot of apartments you can choose to live in gated communities, where they are gated and you need a password to enter in. Again, the same thing happens on campus. Usually to enter into a building, you usually use your student ID to tap the kiosk, and then it lets you enter. So the same thing also applies for a lot of gated communities. This is quite common in the US, by the way. Another thing is getting to know your neighbors will increase your safety. One of the things about living on campus is you know your neighbors. They're all students. Off campus, that might not be true. You can be living, depending on where you are, you can be living with all types of people. I think the other parts are quite simple, which is not to let unknown people into your house. Get to know them before sharing your personal space with them. There is something called renter's insurance. So usually, sometimes it's involved in your rent, sometimes it's not, but it's always good to ask for renter's insurance. It's an insurance that is in case that there is a fire or a theft. Renter's insurance takes care of it, and it's usually not that expensive. I'll give you an example. One of the graduate students at my university had a fire in their apartment, and they had a passport inside the apartment. And it was a microwave that caught fire, and the passport was right next to it, and the passport burnt down. So the renter's insurance gave that student enough compensation for him to be able to get a replacement passport, and that really helped out. Whereas if that person did not have renter's insurance, it would have been a really big hassle. So here's another thing that you should know about renter's insurance. By law, all apartments need to have a smoke detector and a fire extinguisher very close by. You'll also have a first aid kit. So you're going to have all of these things. You actually might not have these things if you go to a very cheap place. So, if you spend $50, $100 more monthly, you're actually paying for a good cause. So having that security that you live in a good place might be in your favor. And yeah, if you see something, say something. If you see something that is off, even if it's something really minor, it always helps to just keep an eye out. Usually, nothing bad really happens, but just the fact that people pay attention keeps your surroundings safe. Prevention is better than cure. So yeah, and it's not an issue to call the police. Campus police are really well trained to deal with international students. Some people might be scared of interacting with the police, but you'd be surprised as to how positive the interaction can be. And it is their job to keep you safe and secure. And you can always call 911 if you have an issue. Yeah. So most of you will be traveling within the United States. United States, for all the bad rep that it gets, you only hear about the bad things on the media, but you don't hear about all the good things that people are doing silently. In addition to that, there are a few things that you can do to make sure that you have a positive traveling experience. These are some very common sense things, but still I want to make you aware of these things. One of them is to research the places before visiting. If you're planning a trip, if you want to go somewhere, you can always research the places. You can always ask a few people, get some recommendations, and that really helps because that gives you something to compare it to. Second thing is not to go alone at night, even if it's for short distances. Again, it's not because there's someone out to harm you as much as it just could be a bad, unfortunate incident. And it could be completely avoided by just avoiding going out late at night, especially off campus. Try to be in well-lit public areas. And again, it really helps to follow general situational awareness, because it won't be an issue. Yeah. So this one is particularly true for women. Just today I was discussing this with another advisor. Most women that I've interacted with in India have felt that going to the US, they felt more safe in the US than they did in India. But with that being said, if you're walking alone and it happens to be slightly late, it does help to follow some rules. Another friend of mine gave me this tip when I was starting, is that she would always have a phone on her and she would actually call someone up and have a very short conversation until she got to her car from her university. And that made sure that if anything happened to her on the way, there's somebody else who knew that she's walking to her car and somebody to check up on her. So there are some really common things that you can do. And the last one is people in the US are generally quite nice. If you feel like you need help, you can always ask for it. You can walk into a restaurant, you can walk into a place of business. If there's a crowd of people, you can just ask for help politely, and more often than not, people will help you. Yeah. So here's a very important topic. So, in the US, alcohol is not as much of a taboo as it is in India, or it's the same thing in India, where in the cities it's not as much of a taboo as it is in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So it will be very common for you to have interactions where alcohol is one of the factors in the interaction. The legal drinking age in the US is the same as India, 21 years of age. You are legally responsible for everything that happens when you're under the influence of alcohol. These are some of the very universal rules when it comes to alcohol, but they are even more true in the US. The rules are very strict about this, and we definitely don't want anyone to have any issue with this. And it's not just about you, but also about the people that are around you. Here it says never to drink and drive. I would take it one step further and also say not to let others drink and drive as well. And that there are so many things that are for your disposal. There's Uber, there's Lyft. You can always call up a friend, and it's very common in the US for getting a call from someone saying that, hey, I've had a drink, and please can you come and pick me up. It's quite common. People very rarely do you hear that somebody makes the decision to put themselves in that situation. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of options, and if you what happens in the US, this is quite common, and this was quite common in my later years as well, is that any group of 4 or 5 would have a person called a designated driver, where this person would not consume alcohol at all, and they would be responsible for the travel. So you can always follow certain good practices to make sure that you have a positive, a good time and not get into any kind of trouble. Here's the lid. If you ask me about the lid, it's an example of if you're, especially for women, if you're going out to the bars, so there's a possibility that someone might spike your drink. So there are these lids that you can buy. These are spike-proof lids, and you can make sure that whatever liquid is there is not spiked by anyone. And again, all of the things that I mentioned in the previous slides does apply here. Things like situational awareness, things like having a group of people around you, it still applies here as well. I want to share a personal experience with you when it comes to alcohol. In my first year of studying in the US, we attended a conference in another university, which is about 14 hours travel from where we were at. And at the end of the conference, it was quite common for everybody to have a good time, to party, and I was completely fine with that. And they asked me whether I wanted a drink, so I said no, because it was my first time going out of the university, and I just wasn't sure. And when I said no, people respected that. In the US, people respect your personal choice, so that is what happened. And then we had gone in two vehicles. One was a van and another one was a car. And the driver of the car, a gentleman much older than me, had a lot to drink, had a perfectly safe time. He was, of course, about the age of 21. But what happened was he was extremely tired that night, and then he went to sleep. The next morning, when it was time for us to come back, he was in no state whatsoever to drive. He was very, very tired, and it would have been a very dangerous thing for him to do, to drive 14 hours. So my decision to not drink that night and to sleep early made me capable of driving all the way from where we were at back to the university, which was a 12-hour drive. And nothing really happened. We were all safe, and we really did not give it a second thought. But now, while I was preparing this presentation, I thought of after hearing all the things in the news, I started thinking that while it was such a small thing for me just to say no and just think 12 hours in advance, like what about the next morning? Just because I did that, I made sure that not only me but the people around me were safe. And the moral of the story is, one, people will respect your choice, so nobody will ever force you to do anything that you don't want to do. And the second thing is, just making good decisions really helps out. I never gave it another thought. It's been 8 years since that happened, and I did not give it a second thought. But it's just thinking back, I think I would like for everybody else to also have a positive experience regardless of where they go. So US is a geographically large land, and especially in certain areas, it's quite common for you to have tornadoes. Because a large portion of the US is flat lands, that gives that there can be like hurricanes, blizzards, flash floods, earthquakes, even wildfires in California, all sorts of natural disasters. And just be aware that these things happen. Universities again are very good at making sure that your students have all the information. There is so when you go to a US campus, you'll get a phone and you will register the phone with the university. So on the phone there'll be an SMS alert system. So whenever, let's say, there's a disaster coming to your university, you'll get an alert. Whether there's any kind of man-made any kind of crime that happens, you'll get an alert. So whatever it is, you'll get an alert on the phone. So always know that there are many things that are put in place for you to be safe. But these things do happen. Of course, it might not be wise to step out of the building if a tornado is happening, or if there has been a warning. So again, this applies to traveling. So if you're traveling let's say you're traveling in the north during Christmas time, I think it really makes a lot of difference if you research the roads. And I think all of you must have used Google Maps. In the US, Google Maps is even better than in India. It tells you any kind of closure on the road, any kind of issue that you might have on the road, and also about the destination, the weather at the destination. So definitely be aware of this. The US has the US weather is on another level. So yeah. So a blizzard is basically really strong winds, but in extremely low weather. So that's a blizzard. Blizzard is very difficult for you to see. If you're in a blizzard, you can't see clearly. And not only that, it might be even difficult to walk. So that's what a blizzard is. If you haven't experienced it, do know that if you go to a university in the northern part of the US, it might be common. There might be a possibility that those places get blizzards. And also, even in the Midwest and certain areas in the South, you might just get extremely strong winds. It's not unheard of to get 80, 100 mile per hour winds, where it's just not safe for you to walk outside. You can look up. You can look these videos up on YouTube, and you'll get an idea of what these are. These usually don't last longer than a few hours, but those few hours are quite critical. So, and you'll get an update that there is a possibility that this might happen. So you can always avoid stepping out during that time. And in the US, there's this saying: there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. So basically what that means is most people in the US are quite prepared. They're used to it, and yeah. they make do with it. So on a US campus, after a while, we students, we just got used to it. So what we used to do, we used to get up in the morning. The first thing that we did was check the weather in the morning. What's the weather like? And based on the weather, we would dress up. So yeah. So about driving in the US, driving in the US is a little bit different. Apart from the fact that it's left-hand drive, the rules of the road are slightly different. Here, what happens with a lot of students is some states in the US let you drive with an Indian license. I would highly recommend that you not do that. I would highly recommend that you get go get the test for driving and get a driver's license from the US itself, from the state that you're in. And this is not just to do with the rules and regulations, but also for you to get accustomed to the style of driving, to and get acquainted with all the nitty-gritties with what it is like to drive in the US. A lot of people drive the US. A majority of the US travel using cars, and a lot of students also might choose to have a car, especially graduate students. So if you do get one, just learn about driving, just the basics. There is something called AAA. AAA is quite very common in the US. If you ever have an issue with the car, if you break down, you usually call up AAA and they come and help you. So some basics about driving, especially in cold places. There is something called as black ice. So black ice, what happens is it rains first, and while it's raining, it reaches freezing point very quickly. So what happens is wherever the rain fell down, that area gets covered with ice. So there's a layer of ice, and it becomes very slippery. Not only is it difficult to walk, but it's also difficult to drive. It might even be difficult to drive with snow tires. So make sure that if there is this kind of weather, just try to avoid going out at all. Universities themselves will shut down for that day usually, because a lot of people commute to campus, and there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that your vehicle is fit for driving. Not only does it stop and go when you want it to, but also that it's safe. So over here, in the US, most people keep emergency supplies in the car itself, and most people know how to change a tire. Things like this is quite common, is if your car gets stalled, usually people just carry jumper cables and somebody will stop and help you. So it's quite common in the US, but most people carry these things, emergency supplies, in the car itself. And another thing is, while you're traveling, you might not need to carry your original documents with you, but definitely carry photocopies of it. You can even keep photocopies of your documents on your phone, but it might help to have hard copies, because in case your phone dies, or having hard copies just might be easier. So you can just, if somebody needs it, you can always give a copy to them. So here, one thing that is, with the way that the police function, the traffic police function in the US, is a little bit different than what we're used to over here. A lot of you are from Mumbai, so I'll use Mumbai as an example. In Mumbai, we have the regular police, and then we have the traffic police. In the US, the police and the traffic police are one and the same. There it functions a little bit different. So on campus, while I was on campus, I'll tell you the examples of how many departments were active. So one, we had the campus police, then we had the city police, then we had the state police, and then we had the highway police. So most roads are going to be very safe, and police might stop you. Sometimes it's random to make sure that is everything fine, and sometimes, especially with newer drivers, you might make a mistake that you don't know that you were not supposed to do that. So if you do get pulled over, it's completely fine. Just stop. Don't get out of the car. Just stay there. The officer will come to you and give you clear directions of what to do and what not to do. Usually it's not going to be an issue. It's quite common to have an interaction with the police, and usually just do what the officer says, and that really won't be an issue. Yeah. So people have a negative impression of the police, but again, I'm going to mention this. Campus police are well trained to deal with international students and their background. Police are there to help you. The presence of a police, it should give you the confidence that that area is secure. And police training, and more and more so, they have started to get cross-cultural sensitivity. So a lot of times police, there are events where you as students can interact with police and you can ask them questions. If you feel that if there's some incident on campus that you're not really sure of, or you just come into campus and you see these really well-dressed officers on campus, it's actually quite common for you to just walk up to them and have a conversation and talk to them and just learn from their perspective, of how to keep yourself safe or how to handle a situation. In the US, just learn all the rules and regulations. Spend the first few months that you're there, just try to understand and learn from the people around you, especially from people who have been there for a while. There's one point over here in the presentation that I want to focus on, which is keep your hands visible. Sometimes, in very rare occasions, police might get scared of who they're interacting with, and having your hands clear and visible gives them also the sense of security that hey, there's no cause for concern here, because yeah. So, and police officers are trained to give instructions step by step. So if you ever have an interaction, just follow their lead. So here, this is an example of Montana State University police. So they have their own police department. This one image is actually of campus police. That's not just for the image. That's actually how interactions end up being on campus. They are quite friendly and they are willing to talk. And the third picture, they're of police on bicycles. They are again campus police. A lot of campuses, inside the campuses, you're not allowed to have cars. So police will probably patrol them on bicycles, and also gives them a higher response time. So there are a lot of resources being spent to make sure that all students have a very safe experience in the US. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you've gained something out of this time to understand what all of your options are and all the ways that you can have a safe and secure experience in the US. So I'm going to open up the question answer section where I'll address your questions, and let's get started. Yeah.
Thanks, Manmohan. There were some really helpful tips in the presentation, and we've got quite a bit of questions. So, without wasting time, let's begin with the first question. Um, One of the students has, the audience has asked, what is the safety for the child in case of peer pressure on alcohol consumption?
Yeah, I'm assuming that you've already said no. First thing is to say no. Um, if, like I said, people will respect your wishes. In case if you feel that your wishes are not being met, leave the premises. And if you're on campus, contact the resident advisor. If you're off campus, then you can contact the international student office, whether it's by phone or whether it's by email. Um, and if you're off campus, if you feel like there's a threat to you, then just call the police. But again, it depends on how bad it is. Usually, I've never heard of this happen, but usually if you say no, people respect your wishes. It's as simple as that. In the US, unlike India, where I'm not just saying when it comes to alcohol, but in the US, peer pressure is not as strong as it is in India.
Great, thanks, Manmohan. And if I may add to this, something that Manmohan already talked about. Have contact numbers, of your friends that you can really depend on. And if a situation like this, if it does arise, you can just call them and remove yourself from such a situation. No matter how ideal the culture is in the US, if you do find yourself in such a situation, then at least have such contacts ready where you can just give a call to someone and they can come pick you up. Manmohan, let's move on to the next question, which is kind of tied up to what you were talking about in the previous question. That let's see, one second. Are there any statistics, which shows bullying rate and in a particular university, and what happens if someone gets bullied?
Yeah. So bullying is an extremely serious offense on American campus. Um, if a student even gets a whiff of bullying, you report it immediately. And about the statistics, all universities have to make all crime statistics public. So if there's any crime that happens on campus, it's always reported. Um, and if there's, like I said, there's an SMS system. Even if something is reported at the other end of campus, that SMS will go to everyone. There are instances where they even give a description of the perpetrator if something like that happens. So the communication is almost immediate, and in terms of statistics, the university will give you those resources. You can actually look this up yourself online. You can type in the city, you can type in the university name, and you can just type in crime statistics. And usually there'll be the police department that makes it public. Yeah. One more thing is in the dorms. In the dorms, like I said, resident advisor is any issue in the dorms, you talk to the resident advisor. Dorms are some of the safest places on campus. If the campus is not already safe, dorms are even safer. What happens on dorms is every hour there is a resident advisor patrolling. And there are quiet hours from Monday to actually all day there are quiet hours. Because of, again, back in the day there used to be physical phones, but now it's all on the cell phone. So if there's any issue, you can just contact the resident advisor or the building manager.
All right. The next question from the audience is that, based on what we hear about gun violence in the US, and if I have to live off campus, does that mean these spaces are unsafe for me?
Yeah. So here, look at the reviews before you choose to live in a place. Usually if it's around a university, the housing is structured in a way that is for students, and also because it's in the developer's interest as well that they have students and they come and live there, so they'll try to make it as safe as possible. But like I said, if you are going to an area, let's say for example Chicago, Chicago has some very good schools, but also Chicago's uh, uh, a little bit unsafe for students. You might, especially for younger students, so you might look at places that are gated, where you need a passcode to enter into the facility. A lot of places hire private security as well. So depending on where you are, just do your research before choosing where to live. And about guns, I would suggest that you stay in touch with the university, and they will train you very specifically to make sure that you avoid any kind of issue in terms of exposure to guns. Yeah.
Thanks, Manmohan. Can I request you to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. And just to add to that, answer, I will also say that, this is the reason why your, welcome orientation is extremely important event. I remember that, during my orientation, we actually had a session with the campus police where they tell you about various resources that are accessible to you in cases of emergencies. So, keep that in mind that, that you're traveling to a very new country with a different culture. Keep open mind and just, have a list of resources ready for situations if, you do come across extreme situations. All right, let's move on to the next question. So, Manmohan, you talked about, rental insurance, right? And someone from the audience wants to know that are there any trusted agencies that, we can confide in for accommodation? Can you comment on that?
Oh yes, the International Student Office should be your first place to contact. Sometimes they might have a list of places that students choose to, even to live off campus. They might have information on it. Towards the end of my time in the US, there were actually renters fairs, so where all the developers used to come and have a fair for students to come and interact with what all options they have to live across, and also the insurance companies would also come. In the US, there are a lot of banks, so you can choose any one of them. What I would suggest is talk to your seniors and talk to your seniors, see what other international students are doing, and again talk to your international student office. They'll give you the best advice.
So, follow-up question to this, if a student is going to live on campus, do they still need rental insurance, or is it only for students living off campus? And again, one more follow-up question to that is, do students have to sign rent lease to get an apartment on that?
So the first question, to the best of my knowledge, if you're living on campus, you do not need renter's insurance. It's only if you're living off campus. And about living off campus, usually you have to sign a lease, which is usually 12 months from the date of signing it. So it's basically like a contract which says that you'll be paying rent for every month at this date, and here's also the security deposit. That's how it works. And renter's insurance usually is optional there. And again, our recommendation is, if you're living off campus, to get it.
Right, perfect. Next question is, you talked about extreme weathers, given that America is a very large country and you do have different climatic zones that you experience in different regions, right? So in addition to what you've mentioned, are there any additional tips, because, you are an alum of one of the US universities, that you can add to deal with harsh weather? Should students then just avoid applying to universities that fall in regions of extreme weather?
The thing is, people have been living there for a long time, especially these places with bad weather. So if you look at it, a lot of people know exactly what to do when it is to do with bad weather. Um, so, for example, if there are places which is prone to earthquakes, let's say some places in California, their buildings are built in such a way that withstand those earthquakes. If places get floods, then there'll be places where you can get shelter. Uh, in the US, almost all universities have, I've seen this, is that they have shelters. In each building, there's a shelter in case of any kind of, whether it's a tornado, whether it's a flood, there'll be an area where you go and seek refuge. So things have been put into place for your safety. Whether or not you wish to live there, I think you have to take all things into consideration. How good the course is, what your options are, the cost, and after taking all things into consideration, you can make the decision. Yeah.
I'll just add one point here that extreme weather can be if you are someone who has different health ailments, and extreme cold is something that you're really really sensitive to, then you might want to think about universities that you're applying to, and maybe don't apply to all the universities in the north where we know that it gets really really cold during the winter winter months. So that would be, just one additional insight. Um, so, you also talked about the situational and behavioral, experiences, right? So, do you think, Manmohan, that it's dangerous to go out and experience nightlife in the US?
No, it's absolutely not dangerous. It depends on how you do it. Um, you should just make good decisions. Like for example, you can have a really good time in the US, especially being a student. A lot of places that are very student centric to make sure that students have a good time. Um, the point of this presentation is what are some of the things that you should be doing to make sure that nothing happens to you, uh, whether it's the worst case scenario or just good general habits to begin with. For example, being with people that you trust. It's very important that you have a friend circle, a social circle that you know that will not let anything happen to you. Um, and I've particularly seen this with women. Women always go with one person to make sure that there's no one who is too tired. Everybody gets home safe, um, and it really depends on your judgment as well. Um, Again, it's not just about the US. Uh, Regardless of where you travel, I think you should follow some uh, cra- good habits like researching a place before going, going with the right people, um, eating right, and making sure that you're not too tired to take care of yourself before going. So things like that. But apart from that, uh, you will have a safe and a good time, um, depending on how you approach it.
And yes, I would definitely say that, you don't want to miss on to all the experiences that you can have outside the classroom as well. It's just that you have to be wise about it. And another one, insight that I have is we have technology at hand. Now you have applications, say WhatsApp, and you can share your location, with your loved ones so that they know where exactly you're heading, and by when you are going to be back, so someone can actually kind of keep track of, if you want them to keep track of where you're going, then that technology is available to you, right? So just be wise about resources that you have at hand, and how you utilize them. Now, we know, Manmohan, there are so many students who want to go to the US to pursue undergraduate programs, right? But these students, for the parents, from the parents' perspective, they are very young. And, the parents are always concerned about their safety. So someone from the audience, wants to know that is it safe for me to send my daughter who wants to pursue an undergraduate program? And she's never been away from home. So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, um, I'll try to answer that question. One, as someone who was very young, um, and I'll try to answer it from the female perspective as well. one thing about being young is, again, the US has a lot to offer, and it might be a lot to take in. Um, so here it's very important to make good decisions. That's one, to showcase good judgment. Um, that being said, at the age of 18, 19, 20, before the age of 21, that in that crucial period, there is a lot of social life on campus itself. So you will never feel the need to, do something off the charted path. You will never feel like, oh, to have a good time I have to go out and sneak out. That doesn't exist. If you actually want to have a good time, you're going to spend time with your friends, with your peers. So that's one. And the second thing is, on campus, most campuses, if not all, do not allow alcohol on campus. And drugs are even a strict no-no. So on campus, you're going to be fine. That being said, see, if someone wants to get into trouble, you will get into trouble. There's no second way of putting this. But whether you're a young kid, whether you're a girl or a boy, on campus it's going to be a very safe environment. And even the culture is so that people frown on you making bad decisions. If you end up missing class, or if you don't take care of yourself, people actually shy away from you. So that actually hampers your social growth, not aids it. And people in the US, they are highly individualistic. So you will notice, a kid will notice this by the age of 18, is that their peers seem very grown up. They seem very mature. And because they've been given that freedom from a very young age, that you'll feel like you'd want to catch up with them, and you'll feel like making good decisions yourself. So in terms of the culture, in terms of the safety, it's a good place. In my time as a student, even in my personal life, I was the first person to leave the country to get an education, and a lot of people question that, hey, it's too young for you to go to the US. I think if that is the decision that you want to take, do know that there are resources that you just cannot imagine. Again, we just made a presentation for 45 minutes. There are things like families usually can take you in. Like there's something called families adopt an international student. There are churches. There are Indian student communities. You will never be out of people who want to help you. And in terms of security, like I in my personal life haven't seen anything before the age of 21. And after that, it was only because I studied sociology and crime that I was exposed to certain elements. Other than that, you're not going to have a bad time. In case if you have a bad time, I hope that we've given you the resources where you'll be able to come out of it as quickly as possible. There is one question that I saw that I do want to address. It's a tricky one, but I think it's important to talk about, is what would be the safe steps to take care of a situation dealing with sexual harassment. I have heard of this happen on US campuses. There is a statistic that I want to make everyone aware of, is a majority of the sexual assault that happened was someone that the victim knew. So that is to help you understand that the kind of people that you have around are critical when you're talking about safety and security. It's not a stranger that makes you feel insecure and unsafe. It's a lot of times it's someone that you know. So do have that judgment of who you keep around you when it comes to that.
All right, great. So we do have another really good question. The student has asked, are there any services provided by the university to students who are suffering from, any type of disability?
Yes. So there is an act called the American Disabilities Act, and most universities, if not all, have services just for disabled students. Whether it's first thing is to go through the international student office. They will put you in touch with who you need to talk to in the student affairs section of the university, and they will help you with anything. So, for example, I volunteered to be a roommate to someone uh, who was deaf and mute. So. And I was surprised with the amount of, so every class that he would take, there would be one person assigned to him, so that he comprehends what's going on in the class. So there was an interpreter. A lot of the times, if the student is going out for some official activity, he would be given an interpreter to travel with him. So there are a lot of resources that a university makes available for students.
Great. I think it's a very important question. And just to add to what Manmohan has already said, that every university has something called as the Center for Educational Access. It might have a different name depending on the university, but the center is dedicated, for students if they require any specific service, to make the transition easy, in studying on US campus. These services are available to you. And it's even more important because you can look this information up while you're researching for the universities. If this is an important factor for you, look at look at university's website and see what different kinds of services and facilities are provided to you depending on the specific disability that you're looking at. Okay, I think we will take one more question, Manmohan. Let's see. Just trying to find a relevant question. There have been some questions that are not relevant to the session. So let's go back to some of these questions here. Can you point at safe, can you name safe cities in the US that, students should apply to?
I can't name particular universities because there are thousands, but I can talk about the type of universities. So if you look at universities, they predominantly come in three types: urban, suburban, and rural. So the thing is, if you want low rates of crime, it's not just low rates of crime, it's actually to do with the density of population of where you're at. So the less the population, the less human activity. So rural and suburban areas tend to be better than the urban areas when it comes to crime. So that's, when you're doing your research, you can do that. Apart from that, I think more or less American campuses are quite safe. Cities, just because the density, it might look like they have a lot of crime, but you'll have to look at per capita crime statistics, which tend to be in places where there is less population. So, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, Manon. You shared, some really important insights on how students can think about safety and security, what resources are available to students while they're studying on campus. I think with that, we'll try and bring the session to close. But before we close the session, for students who joined in today, including parents as well, that thank you for attending this session, and we hope that you found this information helpful. In a series of study in the US that US consulate does with Education USA every month, we have the next session coming up on April 8th. And the session is going to be on choosing amongst your US university admits. So if you are a student who is at a stage where they have gotten some admits at this point and are thinking about how to go about choosing between the universities, this would be a really helpful session for you. And for students who are just beginning their planning to apply to the US universities, can definitely attend the session to get started on understanding what factors are important, and how you can even include those factors at the time of researching universities. In the next 3 months, we have 3 upcoming student visa sessions as well. So please keep an eye out on the US consulate social media handles, be it Facebook, Instagram, as well as the Education USA's event calendar that has been shared in the chat box. The recording of today's session will be available, I think, in a week or so, and will be provided to you so that you can, go back and see. If you have more questions, you can always reach out to us, and our email address has been shared in the chat box as well. And with that, I would like to thank the consulate team as well, who relentlessly works to, make these sessions successful. Thank you, Manmohan, again for giving us valuable information, and thanks to the audience who joined in. With that, I hope everyone has a good evening, and we will bring the session to close now.